program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Hey, Dave, move your food.
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
I want to see your face.
One, engage!
All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Prodigy edition, and I'm your host, Captain Michael Flores. Yeah, I'm a captain of the USS Rain Man Digital, and in the studio with me is Ensign. Someday you'll get a promotion, but I like to hold you down, kind of like Janeway held down Kim for 7 years.
And now she seems to be appearing, doing it to Dahl in this episode.
Yeah, well, he needs to be held down. He has a lot to learn. Ensign Kim makes him look like, he makes Ensign Kim look like Admiral material.
Admiral material.
Yeah. All right. So if you are new to our show, you can find us on. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought.
You lost your train of thought already.
Ensign Kim threw me off. I'll blame him. If you're new to our show, we do cover a wide variety of Star Trek content. You can find our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search From the Holodeck. Our preferred podcast provider is iTunes because people can leave reviews and ratings, which does, in fact, help us quite a bit. The more ratings we get, preferably 5-star, it triggers the algorithms and more people see our show. Thank you. All right. So today, David, you and I are going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 3, not Episode 2. I was unaware, even though I knew last episode was Part 1 and 2.
Part 1 and 2.
It just completely went over my head that was Episode 1 and 2. So I was confused when they were promoting Episode 3 this week. I'm like, wait a second, what happened to Episode 2? And then I realized that we actually reviewed Episode 1 and 2. So today we are talking Episode 3, titled Starstruck.
And dude, I am so thankful we got Episode 1 and 2 together because I think
it wouldn't have given us enough.
It wouldn't have given us enough and get to this point in Starstruck.
Yeah.
Where now we're hitting all cylinders.
Yeah, we're definitely where we need to be. I just want to say that I think we need to give a moment of silence to show our appreciation for hologram Janeway drinking coffee. Dude, I fucking laughed. I was like, that is fucking amazing.
Yes, it was. I was giddy when she shows up at the end and she's like holding her cup of coffee, and I'm like going, wow, that never gets old.
Yeah. She's a hologram, but who gives a fuck? It doesn't make any sense, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Keep drinking coffee, Janeway. So this episode was written by Chad Quant, I want to say, is how you pronounce his last name, and the synopsis. Even with the guidance of their hologram advisor, Janeway, the crew of the Protostar is tested when their ship is on a dangerous cosmic collision course. So looking at this episode through the lens of a new viewer or a new fan of Star Trek, which is what I'm going to be doing throughout. I'm going to try my best to do that, to see what they're trying to do. Because as we know, this show is purposely geared toward the newer fan, the younger fan.
Younger, that's the key. That's the key word there.
Yes.
Younger.
Yes, the target demo being young, fresh faces, essentially the future of the Trek fandom. It works, in my opinion. It works quite well with how they're utilizing Janeway as an instructor. It's a bit meta because she's being used to instruct the kids on the ways of the Federation and Starfleet, and by doing so, she's teaching the younger audience. So it's quite clever, and it's a smart way to essentially explain, because I'm not a fan of exposition, and how do you explain the Federation Starfleet without sounding like you are going through an exposition dump? Well, here we go. We have a group of people who have no idea what any of this is. So let me go through a 30-second spiel and make sure not just the characters know. It's not for your benefit. No, it's for the young, fresher, future Trek fandom.
And if you think about it, dude, I mean, Star Trek is a franchise that is their bread and butter. It's the ability to tell a story, but also kind of give their own narration to the audience. You know, the ability to basically not just tell a story, but give meaning to that story. And that's always been a Trek trope. It's part of the philosophy. It's why we always talk about Star Trek philosophy. Why? Because every single piece of Star Trek has that really great gift of being able to break the fourth wall, or even treat the entire series like there is no fourth wall.
Or there's a lesson to be learned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I hope, sticking with your line of thought for a second here, Dave, I hope they continue to do what they did in this episode, teaching kids the importance of humility and teamwork,
Yes.
which is definitely one of the themes of the episode. There are also some Voyager parallels that work quite well, particularly because of Janeway's involvement in the story.
Oh, yeah.
The whole wayward crew will have to work together if they hope to survive in the Delta Quadrant.
Well, there's trying to create, like, not just this capable crew, but get this group to be almost like a family unit.
Yeah. Yeah, to represent the utopian parameters of the Federation.
Yeah.
So I dig what they did in this episode. Now, I'm not typically a fan of conditioning children by way of kid television shows. I find many times the ideology of some of these shows is at times bothersome. I have a son and a child, and there have been times watching those kid shows, and I'm like, what are you fucking teaching my kid right now? Wow. You know, and I'm not talking about progressive ideals, just certain things that I pick up on that's problematic in my opinion. I don't want someone else inculcating things into my child. But the ethical and moral principles of Star Trek, I feel in many ways, are universal. It isn't to be debated. So when you're teaching kids the basics of ethics, which is what Star Trek at its core is about, it's about ethics and morality from a utopian lens. That's the concept of Star Trek, that we have risen above. We have progressed, to a point in human society that we are better than what we were. And we have run from our past. We don't forget it because we need to remember what we've done, but we don't allow it to hinder our progress any longer. So the ethics and morals of Star Trek are universal. So if this show uses that as a way to teach kids the basics of ethics and morals, I'm fucking fine with that because it's true to Star Trek. And who can deny that ethics is something that you don't want your kids to learn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the way that Star Trek does it, too, is it doesn't simply make it, black and white or right or wrong. It just poses it out there. It poses the questions.
Poses the questions.
It makes us as the audience and the people who are watching the story and watching the narration unfold have us come up with our own answers.
And that's the beautiful thing about the earlier iterations of Star Trek. And when I say earlier, I mean the original series. I am talking about Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, specifically those three. They very rarely had episodes. In fact, I can't even point to any where they were absolute in an idea or a concept philosophically.
Yeah.
In fact, in TNG, Picard wrestled with ideas and made decisions that were borderline questionable at times. Not from a morality standpoint, but possibly an argument or debate to be made in terms of ethics, especially when you look at the Prime Directive and what it means and how you cannot interfere with a species, a pre-warp civilization, even if a volcano is about to erupt and murder them, because that's the natural progress of their species. So, I mean, that's definitely questionable, but that's the ethics of Star Trek. And to see our characters sometimes wrestle with those ethics, I think that's what Star Trek's always been about. It's not about saying, hey, look, this is the right way to think. This is what you should do. No, it's about posing those questions and allowing the audience to draw their own conclusions. Did, Commander Sisko make the right decision when he created a farce hologram or holodeck program of the involvement of Romulan in the Dominion War, so he can bring them to their side, or bring who was it? I forget now the scenario. Do you remember the episode where Commander Sisko created a false hologram recording of people making decisions? Oh, it was to bring the Romulans into their camp. Yes, they made the Dominion look like they did something, like they were planning an attack on Romulus, so that the Romulans would join their confederation, their union against the Dominion. And that was one of the darkest episodes I've ever watched. And they didn't tell you Sisko was wrong. It left it open-ended. You decide, will this come back and haunt Sisko? So bringing it back to Prodigy, it would be a huge missed opportunity if the writers don't include some basic tenets of philosophy in the way of morals and ethics.
Well, the thing that made me comfortable in this episode in regards to that was the fact that they just didn't make Dahl sound immature. Like, oh, he's making these decisions because he's immature. He's a kid. No, they actually gave they throughout the episode during the episode they gave reasons why Dahl is doing the things he's doing. You know, like why does he dislike the hologram and Federation? Because he has no trust for authority. Look what authority has done to him.
Yes.
And when they brought that up, I was like, okay, this is good. This is decent writing then, because in a normal bad writing that tries to tackle philosophy and, you know, miss it by 100 miles, they wouldn't do that. They would not at least pose the other side of the argument.
Oh, David, yes, you're absolutely right, because that was a moment that I really liked, because yes, we as an audience understand that the Federation Starfleet, for the most part, represents fantastic ideals for a universe, right? That's what they stand for. We know that. But that doesn't mean there aren't areas to question. And to have Dahl do that in that way and bring up the question, well, should I listen to authority or should I question? Should I have the intelligence to ask my own questions rather than simply rolling over and saying, yes, ma'am, I do it as you say, which individualism is a big part of Star Trek, even though Star Trek's built on socialist ideology in a lot of ways, they also have been about the individual opposed to the collective. That's why the Borg was fucking amazing in the sense of allegory, because of the collective versus the individual. And you see that aspect of Star Trek being brought in by having Dahl question the authority of hologram Janeway and the Federation.
Exactly. Not just the authority of Janeway, but the idea of the Federation.
Yep.
Why should we trust them? And then he brings up the fact that the Protostar was a stolen ship. And he's like going, why would the Federation ever offer anybody aid?
Yeah.
And then all valid questions. Now, normally, if it was like a typical kids show, they would have done like what everyone in the beginning of the show with all the characters. What do they do? Sure, Janeway, whatever you say. Dahl's the only one that says no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do what you say because I don't trust you.
And we needed that, because I feel like at surface value, people may think, oh, it's just a rebellious kid. But it's more than that. It actually shows that Dahl... Is it Dahl or Del? I keep forgetting. Dahl. It shows that Dahl has actually leadership qualities. The fact that he is questioning things rather than simply saying, okay, sure, I'll do what you say. He's showing leadership skill. If Picard or Kirk were put in the exact same scenario, you don't think they would ask questions?
Oh, yeah, come on. Why does God need a starship? The best questioning of authority ever.
Yeah. Yeah. So teaching kids the differences between ethical objectivism versus ethical subjectivism is one example that I hope they get into. For example, in this episode, we find out that Rock... Is it Rock? I'm still trying to learn these characters' names. It's Rox or Rock?
It's Rock.
Rock. We find out that Rock has never had any other food than what was given them in prison.
Yeah, the neutrino slime thing.
Yes, and I assume that implies that she's been a prisoner her whole life. And I hope we explore the issues of child labor and enslavement. I mean, isn't that what they're doing? If Star Trek were ever fully to return to its roots and give us those philosophical vignettes, this is the opportunity to do so in this show. It's the perfect arena for those types of things. Let's get into questioning slavery. The fact that Rock knows nothing else.
Yeah.
Rock may think that slavery is okay because in their part of the quadrant, it's a part of life. And to some, they can justify it. Rock may be able to justify why he's a slave or why she's a slave, which is a version of ethical subjectivism. So if
Yes.
we bring in ethical objectivism, which for the most part deals with universal beliefs, universal ideals like, hey, I think most people can agree that you should not burn a infant and then eat them. I think most people can agree. That's an example of ethical objectivism. And if you can agree on 4 or 5 objective tenets of ethics, then that is how you govern your society.
Yeah.
It's why the Prime Directive in Star Trek works so well, because that is an objective law right there.
Mm-hmm. And think about not like every single character in at least a majority of the characters in this episode have that moment of actually true character development where you actually see them each
We get a bit from all of them, yeah.
dealing with I'm gonna well, it's probably best to say it like a traumatic life.
Absolutely,
I mean,
they're slaves.
They were slaves, and then you not only see that, but also through Gwen, who's coming from the position of being on the upper food chain, so to speak, in society. But this whole time, she's always thought that everybody that was in that camp was a prisoner, just a
Right.
prisoner, not a slave, but a prisoner.
But this is where again, ethical objectivism versus ethical subjectivism can come
exactly.
into play, because Gwen in her life, obviously slavery is okay because she never tried to do anything and she felt like they had all committed a crime.
committed a crime because they were prisoners.
And crime or not, I think a lot of people can agree that a child should not be put into a slave camp.
well,
So I want to see some deprogramming from Gwen's side. I want to see her be challenged through Federation philosophy, that she then has to now question her entire way of life and the way she was raised, and even now question, which I'm sure that's what they're doing in this episode, or what they were doing in this episode. She's starting to look at her father as someone that might not be who he
claims to be.
yeah, that he is the bad guy of this story. I mean, there were definitely those moments where
Oh, yeah.
you saw her ponder those thoughts
And it's amazing that we're getting this type of storytelling
in with 3 episodes
with 3 episodes in a animated
cartoon.
that's meant for kids.
Yeah.
When you're talking about comparisons to not only that, but the one comparison I thought of is think of how North Koreans, a lot of reports from North Koreans who defect over, they have to deal with suddenly coming to a realization, oh, wait, this whole, for majority of my life, I was told this is the way, this is the
Right.
best, this is how you live. And then suddenly they go over to another place and they find out, no, that's
This
you're only
isn't
doing-
normal. I'm
this
sorry to
isn't
tell you.
normal.
Yeah.
This is the other side, and basically you can do this.
Yeah.
You do have personal freedoms. You're touching on parallels like that in a kids show.
Yeah.
And I'm going,
And I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it. I think that this is a good beginning
It is.
of a Star Trek series.
It is. I'm not going to argue with that.
I like Picard.
Oh, stop it. Stop it. Don't get me angry. I was happy for a
I was
moment.
happy.
Okay, so, David, a vehicle replicator? Have we ever seen that before? Because if not, I love it.
No, we haven't. But honestly, dude, I mean,
it
this
makes-
ship, the Protostar, I cannot wait. This is so nerdy of me right now.
I know what you're going to say.
I cannot wait till they release the blueprints of the Protostar
They're
because
gonna
they're
do it.
going to do it.
They'll give us the art of Star Trek Prodigy book.
Star Trek
They
Prodigy.
do it for all Star Treks,
Or
yeah.
even the manual to the ship, the ship
technology
itself,
manuals,
the
yeah.
technology manuals that they
Yeah.
always. I'm waiting for the Protostar because It has 2 warp cores, which makes sense if it's based off of Voyager, because remember, Voyager's the system at the very end of Voyager was so advanced, it was the fastest ship in the Federation.
Yeah.
Because they engineered the ship to travel faster to get back home.
Yeah.
And now you have the Protostar, who has that same technology, just revamped and basically engineered to perfection. And on top of that, they have the replicators that, quite honestly, I find believable, especially after Voyager, where you're dealing with like holograms.
Listen,
the whole hologram technology. Of course, you can actually do it.
If Discovery is going to have holographic nacelles,
exactly,
and Picard is going to have an android body that he's going to put his fucking brain into, and the androids, Data's offspring, they have devices that you just have to use your imagination to fix things.
Picard's technology doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. But I'm saying that if you could have fucked up technology that doesn't make sense, this is a return to form.
Yes.
Star Trek has always had technology that, sure, is considered fringe science, but fringe science many times is rooted in actual science, and all fringe science is science that hasn't been proven yet.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that, especially it does make sense when you have replicators that can create food of any type. They can create uniforms and weapons. Why wouldn't the next logical step be to replicate vehicles? Which, Dave, we do need to be careful, because then you have an endless supply of shuttles, and that that could lead into some dangerous territory in the ways of writing. You want to be a little careful with that. But I'm okay with it overall. It does work. I like it.
Yeah, same here.
Especially if the Protostar, it's like the Discovery. You remember in Discovery we both liked the what the fuck is the drive? The mycelial drive?
Mycelial drive, yeah.
Like, we both like the idea.
The spore drive?
The spore drive. We both like the idea, but we both said, fuck, dude, this is in the original series time frame. You got to be careful. There was no spore drives ever in Star Trek that we've seen. And the way they ended up reworking it, the fact that it was a prototype starship, and then, of course, they moved into the future, and that now justifies why we don't have spore drives.
Yes.
Now, same thing here. The Protostar is a prototype. So it's going to have technology that may not be mainstreamed yet across Starfleet and the Federation.
And also, you got to throw in the series itself takes place in the future of Star Trek.
We don't... it's slightly into the future.
It's slightly into the future. It's not like Discovery.
No.
No, it's not like Discovery.
Or even Picard. It's before Picard as well.
It's before Picard, but the technology still makes sense.
No,
because it has to go that progression.
Yeah,
from
I agree.
Where we have seen.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of the Protostar, there's a few things we learned. Now, I'm surprised you didn't mention this when you were talking about the warp drive, the dual warp drive. There was also something that, Pog, is that his name?
Yeah, Jackom.
Pog. Isn't that a porn thing, Pog?
That's PAWG.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's embarrassing. But anyways, Pog, if that's his name.
Yes, it is.
He had looked at something and said, "What's this?" So there's also something else in that engineering room that we don't know what it is or what's capable of doing yet.
Yeah,
a piece of technology.
It was some kind of mysterious system that they found.
Could it be like a transwarp type thing?
Would you be surprised? Because if it's based off of Voyager,
yeah, you
they
gotta
have to have it.
Yeah,
it has to have the transwarp drive.
We have to start seeing some technology advancements because of Voyager and the fact that they came back home in a hybrid ship that was like 50% Borg technology. Do you think Starfleet threw that away? No fucking way. They probably fucking reverse engineered the shit out of that. So if we have some advanced technology because of that, that would make perfect sense. In fact, if they don't have that in future iterations of Star Trek,
I'll be upset.
I would be upset.
I'd be upset because it's like, what the hell do you guys think? I can understand. Like, say for example, like,
are there ethical reasons why they wouldn't use Borg technology? Maybe,
or even like in let's take it in Discovery's point of view that basically a great cataclysm happens and all technology gets shut off. Okay, But like, if you just don't say that, basically, the Federation didn't take didn't take what they learned from Voyager when it
Right.
comes back, and just said, "Oh, you know what? That ship, yeah, just throw it away. It's okay. Decommission it."
Yeah. Okay, so on top of that, we also learned a few additional things about the Protostar. Hologram Janeway was programmed to assist the crew.
Yes.
We don't know who this crew was supposed to be on their journey back to Federation space, adding more to the mystery behind the Protostar. Also, she said that she's not there to command, only run the lower level functions of the ship. So I am looking forward to finding out the mystery behind the Protostar, why it was there, who was the crew supposed to be, how did the Diviner come to the knowledge of its existence, how does it know of the Federation. Dave, 3 episodes in, and we have a fucking mystery.
And do you realize that this Janeway has the personality of Janeway when she's older,
A little more wiser.
She's a bit more motherly.
Oh, come on, simmer down. Don't diminish her sexuality.
Oh, dude.
Mothers
Janeway's
can be sexual.
Yes, Janeway's a MILF.
Yeah, and
Okay?
not when I say mothers, I'm not talking about mine. Okay, simmer down. I'm talking about general MILFs, David, if you will, right?
Yes.
Sometimes even gilfs.
Even Gills. Hey, you know, Whoopi Goldberg still looks good. And
Fuck
so does
you with that. Why?
But anyways.
You have to ruin my. I was getting all into Janeway, and when I think about Janeway, I start thinking about 7 to 9. It's a whole thing. And then I start shipping both of them at the same time with Chakotay. Ensign Kim comes in. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? What a wonderful tea party.
But picture Kate Mulgrew now.
No,
Kate
come on,
Mulgrew
David,
now.
why are you ruining things? Anyways, all right. So, what is Chimerium? Star Trek Prodigy is the first show that it's been mentioned, and well, let me rephrase that. It's the first canon compliant iteration of Trek that has mentioned Chimerium. Now, according to Memory Alpha fandom, the only entry for Chimerium is from this show. Chimerium was a luminescent orange crystalline mineral. It was valued in a region of the Delta Quadrant with a single large crystal sufficient to purchase a small starship. It could also be used to create a Chimerium cloak, which we saw in this episode. Tars Lamora was rich in Chimerium, particularly in the deep core. It was mined by slave labor, as we have seen in this show, and ruled by the Diviner. So that is the only entry that we have that is canon compliant for Chimerium. So we aren't quite sure what Chimerium is fully about. Is it native only to the Delta Quadrant? Either way, I have a feeling that it's going to play a bigger role in this show. Now, there are some clues. If you go to the non-canon site of the Star Trek wiki, they do have an entry for Chimerium. It was a rare mineral with a natural sensor blocking and phaser reflecting properties, and it was first introduced into the ebook Invincible, The Next Generation, a Time 2 novels. So, that being said, can we derive some meaning from that, or is that purely coincidence that Chimerium was used in a non-canon compliant book, and now it's being reworked into canon by way of Star Trek Prodigy? We shall see. It can't be a coincidence, right? I mean, Chimerium and that's not really a popular word.
No. And it's definitely a play on dilithium and energy sources that is found in Star Trek.
Yeah.
So and the thing I do like too, if it is actually only found in the Delta Quadrant, that adds more story to actually even the universe that Voyager started.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, we barely scratched the surface with the Delta Quadrant, because you got to remember, Voyager just tried to speed along
Yeah.
and get out of Dodge as fast as possible, but then They only stopped once in a while to see, hey, what's this energy source? And they usually find like strange anomalies, and that's
Right.
usually how episodes would go.
Sometimes it would stop so Janeway can, get plowed.
By a hologram.
She's a very sexual lady.
I still say that my favorite scene.
So inappropriate. We're talking about a Nickelodeon kid show.
No.
But we don't give a fuck, do we?
No. Because I'm sorry, this is the same show, Voyager, that basically Janeway looked at a hologram and told it, I want him taller.
Yeah. She shaped her own version of a perfect man.
Of a perfect man.
Yeah. And then when they had to delete the program, she was like, do you have to delete all of it? Can you save something? So she was into it.
She was into it.
Good for her. I love her. All right, so let's move into our final thoughts and our RMD score. David, I want you to start things off. Keep it brief.
Okay, briefly, score right away is a 90. I'm giving this episode
Wow.
a 90. It's a really Prodigy has gotten off to a good start. And particularly with episode 3, now we got to see more of the Star Trek bones of the series in this episode than like in part 1 and 2 when they're trying to set up their narrative.
Yeah.
We got to actually see more about the Protostar, which I was giddy about because I wanted to know.
I don't know enough. I want more.
Exactly. As a Star Trek fan, the ship is always a character. We
Yep.
want to know every single little nacelle of the ship, every single knowledge.
Mhm.
And Protostar, do you realize?
We want to get inside all their Jeffries tubes. We want to get all up in it.
Do you realize the Protostar, besides Discovery, and if you think about it, Discovery's an old ship. The Protostar is actually a newer ship, and it's
At least, I mean, we're assuming.
we're assuming,
Yeah.
but the Protostar is one of the more brand new ships we've been introduced to.
The moment they release a model of it, I'm buying it.
Oh, easily, yeah. I think the Protostar is a beautiful ship.
Yeah. So 90%. Okay.
90%. I'm actually getting really invested in the show.
Yeah. I will say that I love Lower Decks, and you can't really compare the two because Lower Decks is a
And you
satire.
shouldn't. Yeah.
But this is more my thing. Like, I do love comedy, and I do love Lower Decks. I'm not going to take away from their success or their great writing from a satirical side. But this show has an opportunity to do some things that Lower Decks can't do. And I'm hoping the writers truly dig deep. And so far, I'm okay with what they're doing. I like that they're finding their moments to give us little Star Trek bits, the classic elements that we all expect from Star Trek. So I'm going to give this episode an 84%. It is a strong installment. We are just getting started. There's so much more to learn. And I love that the show has created this general mystery that keeps the viewer invested. Like, I am very interested in finding out what this is all about. So I'm excited. And David, this does bring us to the end of our discussion. But before we go, I want to remind people that we do have a Patreon page. And I would love for people to help us out and subscribe. We do need the assistance of our listeners. So if you go to patreon.com/RaymanDigital and pledge $5 or more a month, you'll gain access to our behind-the-scenes tier where we drop pre-shows every single episode. And the pre-shows are basically mini-shows where we talk about whatever is recent in the world of Star Trek news, maybe some thoughts on Discovery that we might have missed or elements that we can't fit into the regular show. And then, of course, with that $5 option, you also receive additional Star Trek from the Holodeck podcast episodes, full podcast episodes where we break down books, comics. We get into actual specific topics, sometimes a specific set of ideological aspects of Star Trek that they have expressed views in, say Deep Space Nine or TNG. We've talked about the Maquis and Q and the Borg. It's endless. And once you subscribe to that tier, you're going to gain access to all of that plus future discussions. And we do need that help. We do. We don't make a lot of money on this network. Most of us work for free. We do it for the love, but we still have expenses. So.
Yes. Gotta keep the lights on.
Yeah, so I want to thank everyone for listening, and thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.